pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We have some meeting minutes, December 3rd.
I don't have the ones from the 3rd, but I do have the ones from the 17th.
Oh,
Yeah, it's just a
Yeah.
section.
Yeah, just didn't get a chance to find
Okay.
the rest of the
Yeah,
ones
I
on the
didn't
3rd.
take it off.
all right. Do you have any questions about that? Or?
I don't have a copy of
I think we just got them electronically. I don't have a hard copy either.
You have the original record.
That was it.
When do we get those?
I might send it out earlier today.
Oh, okay.
Do you want me to go make?
We can table it if you
Yeah, let's
want.
table it for now. I haven't looked at it yet.
Hey,
Okay,
can
we'll
we
just-
table to the end of the meeting just because?
We can do that too. I can.
Okay.
Well, either to the end of the meeting or
Just
to
'cause
next.
I need those to send to the state for the certifications on the,
Oh, you need the vote.
for the
All right.
vote.
All right.
Minutes.
I'll
Just
read
gotcha,
it-
okay.
I'll get rid of when we get going. I guess we'll go through
Yep.
it. I just haven't had a chance to go
No
through
problem.
it today.
Nope.
Okay.
Should have to you earlier.
All right. With that, anybody have any public comments? Anything they'd like to bring up that wasn't specifically on the agenda? Yes, Mary Jane.
I'd like to speak about the missing fountain at the South Barre Common. The back of the war memorial says 1914 to 1919. This fountain is dedicated to those who left their daily tasks among us to fight and die if need be, that freedom may live. There's 100 names on the front. And it's chopped off. The fountain part of it is chopped off. Maybe
Okay.
the veterans could fix it, or maybe for Memorial Day this year, because it was 1919, this is 2019, would be nice if they could repair it. And the other thing, we're missing a 6-foot cornerstone pillar on the South Barre Common. There should be 4, there's 3, and as you walk in, there's 2 like about 3 feet, the others are 6 feet, they're made of brick. If we can't find it and it hasn't been put away, maybe somebody could talk to John Pondelli at the Wildwood, and maybe before they demolish all the stones, when it comes down, they could take some of those stones and build up another 4th pillar. You know, sort of like freedom, you know, the 4 freedoms, like assembly, speech, religion, and guns and all that. If we could put a 4th one up, and maybe the ROTC or something. could
Okay.
Fix that 4th pillar.
You got it.
It's lopsided. Is my minute up? Okay, we're done.
It's all right. Thank you. I appreciate it very much. Thank you. Yes, sir.
The last meeting, I think it was, I asked you to look into the possibility of replacing a sign down here. It says one way going up.
Yeah.
And I think you sent me a text and told me there was a date.
There was a DPW commission meeting scheduled for last Monday
Yeah.
or Tuesday, I forget, with holidays
14th
lately,
or something.
but it,
Monday.
it got canceled at the last minute due to some unforeseen circumstances. Somebody had a child that got sick and couldn't attend, and that threw off the meeting. So it's been rescheduled, so no action's been taken on that item yet.
Is that on their agenda, do you know?
I will make a request to make sure it's on the next meeting agenda. I don't recall if it was. I do believe we asked to send it out to them. I just didn't follow up to check to see if it was on, because I just planned on talking about it when I showed up. So I'll make sure it's properly noted.
I left last week before the debate as to whether or not you'd created a proper admission statement for the advisory committee. Has that all been hashed out? I know you're gonna deal with it later, but is that?
We've got the draft. We've all been given electronic copies. We're gonna make that final vote tonight. So it's actually in
You mean on the draft or on the creation of the committee?
the committee charge,
So the.
which is
roster-
the draft I think you're referring to.
Yeah,
What
I-
they're supposed to do,
Yeah,
or,
I mean,
yeah.
you said that you had explained thoroughly to each, potential participant what their charge was gonna be, but it was not yet in print. Somebody disagreed with that, so
Yeah.
that's not my question. Is there gonna be a vote on the participants of the committee tonight, or just the draft approval?
I believe it's both, potentially.
Okay.
We'll end up having to make the motion for the vote, so I don't wanna commit the whole board to something like that. I'm just saying that, yes, both are likely.
Is the pool door closed?
Well,
Who's the
so
pool-
far, we didn't officially ever close it. We just kept it open as long as anybody asked up into this last moment. So what we have in front of us is who we got. If you're interested, I'm guessing I'm willing to listen.
I'd like to add my name to
Okay, well, you're here at the right meeting. Thank you.
it. Okay.
Anybody else? Okay, then. We have, how long do we think this is gonna take? Peter?
10-15 minutes tops.
Okay, let's go ahead and do that one first. We'll do the, old business hazard mitigation plan. CMRPC's been helping the town with that. They're here for a quick presentation.
Sit here so we hope we can see. Good evening, everyone. My name is Peter Pelican. I'm an assistant planner at Central Mass Regional Planning Commission. As you may or may not know, Adam Menard, who did a bulk of the work, did Big Gary. He's left CMRPC to take a new job. So I've taken over since, so most of the credit I have to give to him. I'm here tonight to present the draft, essentially the draft and the foundation of how we got to this point of the hazard mitigation plan for Barre, Mass. So why is Barre creating this plan? The Federal Disaster Mitigation Act of 2000 requires that cities and towns have this plan or an updated plan to be eligible for FEMA mitigation grants. And there's two parts to the FEMA mitigation grants. One set of monies is set aside for when a disaster actually happens, to essentially relief funds. The other set of money is set aside for mitigating disasters. So what is the town doing to prevent reoccurring flooding and such things of that nature? There's money set aside, you can apply for grants to solve those problems when you have this plan in place. So what is the hazard mitigation plan? It's essentially a fancy term for all the things that a city can do and does to lessen the impact of natural hazards on the town's buildings, people, and services in the towns. It can be simple things such as town regulations and zoning. It can be something a bit more time-consuming and money-consuming, as like repairing culverts and redesigning roadways. It can also be installing or dredging retention basins, and not limited to anything that I just said. We like to think of the mitigation, the hazard mitigation, as the town is spending $1 now and essentially saving $4 in response costs by coming up with this plan. Some of the things that we want to think about when we're thinking about hazard mitigation, it's not hazards such as terrorism or things of that nature. It's a 100% natural hazards. So in those natural hazards, we can think of flooding, hurricanes, tornadoes, winter storms like the one we just had, snow and ice damage, earthquakes, something we don't often think about, but there was an earthquake about a month ago out in Littleton. Extreme temperatures, so drought. The town has a lot of wells. Droughts can have quite the impact on that, and brush fires as well. So kind of like I was saying earlier, we're thinking about hazard mitigation at its core is essentially a disaster happens, the town rebuilds whatever was wiped out, burned, things of that nature. This similar disaster happens again, town keeps rebuilding, and this cycle just continues and continues and continues. So what the hazard mitigation plan intends to do is to come up with ways of how we can break that cycle, how we can build a structure or something to prevent disaster from happening. I mean, we can't prevent the disaster from happening, but we can, you know, reroute the flooding that occurs continuously, send that water elsewhere instead of into a building. So the process so far, the CMRPC provided technical assistance to the town, so we created maps, we've dug into a lot of statewide info to look at 100-year floodplain, 500-year floodplain, wildfire plains, things of that nature. The town created a team that consists of multiple people in the town. A few are here tonight. Andrew is one of them, the police chief's one of them, fire chief, members of the planning board. They all got together, had 3 meetings where we identified critical infrastructures and hazards. We made sure that the maps were correct from the info we found from the state. Also came up with strategies that the town can implement into this plan to help mitigate hazards. Today is the first public meeting, so we're introducing everyone into the draft plan that we have so far. When this meeting's over, we'll submit the plan for a public comment for a 2-week period. After that, we'll send it off to MEMA, MEMA approves it, sends it to FEMA, FEMA approves it, it comes back to us. We present it back to the town to the Board of Selectmen, for adoption of the plan. Once that's adopted, it goes back to FEMA for a final approval, and then you have a plan that's good for 5 years. Basically, we already talked about the development of the plan. That was maps, locally identified hazards, reviewing existing and coming up with new strategies for the plan. And we gathered feedback and input from the public through a public survey that's been on for the last roughly year. In that survey, roughly 60% of the town said they were somewhat concerned about natural disasters in the town, and 75% of the town felt that the town is prepared for a natural disaster. Kind of the 4 places that we look the most for hazard mitigation planning is structure and infrastructure projects, preparedness, coordination, and response actions, education awareness, and local plans and regulations. So in structure and infrastructure projects, we like to think of, in Massachusetts, the tendency tends to be that flooding is kind of the #1 thing that we want to think about in Central Mass. Most of the towns were built way back in the day. It's a very hilly area, so flooding seems to be a concern. We can also take a look at man-made structures to control water flow, so culverts or drainage ditches, things like that. That's about it on that. We can actually think too about hurricanes. How can we prevent hurricane damage, like structurally, when we think of bylaws and things like that, building codes. We identified a lot of the town's critical facilities, disaster response sites, fire station, police station, town hall. Also want to think of elderly housing, so places of need of assistance in a storm or a natural disaster. We looked at places of assembly, mapped all those, and other critical infrastructure of like dams, pump stations, communication housing, things like that. Another place we looked was preparedness and response. So things along the lines of national flood insurance programs, community rating systems, which Worcester is the only community in Central Mass that takes part in that due to their high number of residents. Evacuation planning was put into the plan in some sense. The facilities and coordination administration, enforcement and collaboration, so those are things like planning board and zoning laws, things like that, town's bylaws. Education and awareness, so this is kind of I don't want to say easy, but low cost ways of planning for hazard mitigation, so you can put out flood and hurricane websites. Hazard information can be a simple pamphlet at the library, schools, town buildings. You can also mail those out if need be. And there can also be public outreach at community held events. So some of the local plans and regulations that were looked at and implemented into the plan were planning and zoning, subdivision and site plans. So essentially thinking, are we building in a wetland, are we building in a floodplain land, and trying to take that new development elsewhere. The hazard identification mapping, like I was saying earlier, a lot of state and federal data was used to map out these 500-year floodplains, wildfire zones. We reviewed the Mass State Hazard Mitigation to make sure that the town of Barre is in line with what the state's trying to do as well. And we can coordinate with the local team to get local information that's outside of the state's data. They aren't in Barre all the time to see that it floods at the intersection of X and Y streets. Some other things that we can think about too, I've kind of mentioned already, was we want to think of earthquakes. There have been earthquakes since going back quite a ways. We identified the earthquakes since 1990. The Littleton one still needs to be added into this data. Some of the existing mitigation strategies that the town of Barre has in place already, some you can see are relatively simple, some are a bit more complicated. But we can think of, when we're thinking of flood-related hazards, something as simple as street sweeping annually, if not biannually, can help mitigate floods. Just cleaning the debris from the streets, typically in the spring and in the fall, keeps those drains clean, those waters can go through the man-made systems instead of someone's basement. Almost done. A few of the things that we came up with in the plan, this is a list of about 4 or 5 out of about 45 that the town has in their strategies. Replace the washout culvert at the Allen Hill Road, develop a plan to remove storm debris blocking the rivers and impacting the free flow of rivers and stormwater drainage. To go right along with that is to implement a townwide debris management program. The town's also looking into finding funding to review and update the local hazard mitigation plan on a 5-year cycle. Like I said earlier, the plan's only good for 5 years. So once the plan expires, which the town's plan expired in 2018, we can then be eligible for those FEMA grants. And we also want to moving forward, integrate the hazard mitigation concerns into transportation projects along with new developments in the town. So kind of where does the town go from here? From here, the draft plan, or we'll send the plan out to public comment for 14 days. Off to MEMA it goes, MEMA approves it, FEMA gets it, FEMA approves it. They send it back to us, take it to the Board of Selectmen to have the Board of Selectmen formally adopt it. Once the board formally adopts it, we send that formal adoption to FEMA, and FEMA essentially gives it the final stamp of approval. Then you have a plan that's good for 5 years. Once it's implemented, you want to establish a local implementation group, prepare a timeline to implement that document, integrate the plans, come up with ways to integrate the plans into other policies, along with updating the plan every 5 years. And that concludes my presentation to the board.
Do we have a copy of the draft plan?
That wasn't good, I can email that out.
Thank you.
Yeah, and if you don't, I can get that to you without any problems tomorrow.
All right.
Any questions? I know that's kind of a lot of information of
This
essentially.
is strictly a natural disaster mitigation that would be looking at things like potential oil spills. And we have railways in town, we have a lot of trucks delivering through town and potential hazards on those trucks. We have propane facility in town and 3 different oil storage facilities in town. So we have large volumes of heating oil that are stored here and moved through here in and out on a regular basis.
Okay.
Does this account for that in any way, or makes any sort of plannings towards what to do if, one of those 10 or 20,000 gallon tanks ruptured from one of those things, or a vehicle delivering in large volume had a problem?
So,
Because that would also obviously impact the waterways and
Yeah.
things in this town.
maybe Andrew can speak to that a little bit better than I can, because he was part of the heart of that planning meeting where he was part of the local meetings, which I wasn't part of, unfortunately. But typically, the plan's geared more towards, like, natural hazards. That's not to say that a natural hazard couldn't impact those sites, which could lead to other hazards along with the natural hazard.
Or vice versa, if those
Or
sites, if it
exactly.
fails, some of those, because we have so much watershed protection land, the potential to contaminate things, and we need to know, I would think an important part of our planning should be how we deal with that
And I
type
think
of
that
thing.
those locations were identified. I'll have to double check the plan that it was implemented in, but we did have, members of the DPW fire, part of those meetings that were there to identify any known hazards.
Obviously, it's something to think about in the fire department,
Yeah.
but it would be
And-
good to be part of this plan for
Mhm.
FEMA MEMA, because
Right.
if we needed assistance and funding or something like that happened.
There is a section in the plan too that identifies all the tier two, companies in town that kind of include transfer station, propane, transfer stations or pumping stations, things like that. So those probably are, I don't wanna say with 100% certainty, cause I don't know right off the top of my head, but I can get that info for you tomorrow, that it's probably more than likely in that section of the plan.
Okay. Just like to see it in there at some
Yeah.
point before it
And if
gets
it's
shipped
not-
off, just, it probably is if it was for the fire and police, but.
And if it's not, we can stand by and we can get those into the plans before we put it out to public comment.
I just
along
think
with-
if it's noted to
Send it out
FEMA MEMA before it goes out, we're more
Yeah.
likely to get assistance if anything comes up with it, because those are realistic concerns, probably more likely than a flood or a tornado or a hurricane in this town, but, the rail yard comes through here, we don't really know what goes in and out of moving and storage down there.
Exactly.
So, but potential, and that's moving and storage is on the water, things we need to be probably more aware of anyways down there, just to make sure that we're protecting the waters.
And you bring up a good point, that is kind of one of the keys to the hazard mitigation is to identify things that are potential hazards that may get overlooked on a day-to-day basis, so.
But the
I'm glad
reload
that
and
you
storage is
brought
right
that
on the
up.
water, but I don't know if we track what they do and don't store or how it's done, but just because we're thinking of this, they're right on the water, potential to have a spill or an incident that contaminate that water, which can impact the Quabbin, obviously, it's pretty serious.
Yeah, so I'll double check just to make sure that's in there, but
I would.
I'm sure it is.
And maybe we have to think about that anyways, I've never paid attention to that, just started me thinking on that path, if there's potential there to contaminate water, we should, see what they have for plans set up to handle their own site.
Yeah,
So-
check their emergency response plans.
So when we get the draft, we'll look into it more, and if we
Yeah.
come up with more stuff, we'll send some comments back.
Okay.
It's just the only thing that popped out,
Yeah.
thinking about it is.
Right. But I appreciate you taking the time to kind of
Just have one
explain
question.
what it was and where it went.
Yeah, I have one question. It
Okay.
seems, what is the state's involvement here? Because it seems to run counter to some of the things the state is doing, like, funding for the Division of Dam Safety. It's really lacking something significantly, things of that nature. We've got restrictions on us on, the last natural flood we had down in the other end of town was caused by beaver dams breaking out during a major rainfall event a few years back. And you can't really touch those dams. Very little the town has to do with those things.
Right.
That's as much a part of the stormwater mitigation process or whatever you choose, but it seems like the burden is falling on the cities and towns and not really on the state is kind of just saying, take it and run with it, and we're not gonna be involved. They have their MEMA and all that kind of stuff, but their actual regulations don't really seem to run counter to what is trying to be done here. I'm not blaming you or anything, understand,
I was gonna say,
but I was
wish
just thinking
I
there's
knew.
no money for the Division of Dam Safety, or there's very little, let's put it that way.
Right, so, I don't wanna say that that's what this intends to do, but there is ways that you can come up with strategies that prove to the state that you have critically looked at things in your town that are problematic when it comes to natural disaster. And the state says, yes, they've taken a good hard look. They give it to FEMA. FEMA says, yes, they have taken a good hard look.
Mhm.
We're gonna make them eligible for these grants. Now, that doesn't mean that if, say, for the town of Barre says, we have Beaver Dam X, that creates these problems every time it rains, or it's burst in the past, and we need to do something to get rid of these beavers and these dams, there is potential ways to use that grant money to relocate the beavers, if you will. Unfortunately, they're,
Yeah.
you know,
Where are you
they're-
gonna put 'em?
Exactly, they're a natural thing, and they're gonna keep coming back more than likely, so
Yeah.
it's sort of that cycle that is its whole separate problem that I think the intention of the plan is to think I guess maybe higher, or not higher, in a different way to solve those problems. Maybe because we can't move the beavers and the dams, we can create, we can use grant monies to create a bigger culvert at this point, or to create a bridge to go around the beavers. I'm not saying that's the end all be all, but there's ways that we can think differently to get around some problems that
Okay.
the state.
Okay, yeah, I understand, it was more a comment than
Okay.
it was, I
Yeah, I had a
understand.
feeling, but I figured I'd throw some of that out there.
I guess there is some recognition too from the state that they came up with the, another planning program, mass vulnerability program that they're trying to
Yeah,
get, you know, a lot of towns to take part in. This was kind of like just introduced last year, but it's almost like around the same premise,
Yeah.
looking at
But
the
it
same
kind
type
of
of
falls in
hazards.
more what he was talking about. It's-
Right.
It's
Yeah.
not
That's
natural
more-
disaster specific, it's all vulnerabilities,
It's all
so like,
vulnerabilities throughout the town, so it would be beaver dams, it would be all the
Beaver dams,
hazards,
they're tough, they try to protect the wildlife, but
hazmat hazards.
the backup behind them can cause flooding, and then if someone has enough of it and breaks it, and whether it was broken or broke by itself, it put 2 feet of water down
Mhm.
in front of Station 2 down there in South Barre, easily 2 feet, almost 3 in places. And it took quite a while to clear that up and flooded several basements and houses on the way.
Basically,
A lot
what
of
our,
water.
what our game plan is that we're gonna, you know, attack the hazard mitigation plan, knock that first, cause that keeps us eligible on the federal level. As soon as we get this knocked out, then we're gonna go after the MVP program to get us going on the state level, so.
So then it's
Yeah.
twofold essentially for the town.
Yeah.
okay.
Well, it's a good start.
Now, are the
Plan
other,
rolling in.
all the towns implementing this at this point, or?
There was 13 towns in our district, which is essentially Barre South,
Yeah,
and then followed the boundaries of Worcester County. And that was, I think, 2 years ago. I
Mhm.
could be mistaken on that, I wasn't there. And currently, there's 27 towns going through this process, and I think there's seven, I believe, have formally adopted it so far. A lot are in the process roughly around this place where they're either presenting the drafts and what they've come up with, or setting up adoption dates with the Board of Selectmen. So there's a substantial amount of towns right now in Worcester County, or the southern half of Worcester County, I should
Okay.
say, that are taking part in this.
Seems like it's something that almost also needs some sort of regional approach or
Yeah, so.
between the towns, because that beaver dam I was referring to actually wasn't located in Barre, it was in Ocam, and it let go. The first natural floodplain in the whole process was the village of Barre Plains. And
From my
when I
understanding.
say it flooded,
yeah.
it flooded.
And fast.
What?
And fast.
Yeah.
And fast, like it was just a wall of water coming down, and it was quite a pond, but,
From my understanding, I want to say it was 5 years ago, they took a more regional approach to it and found that there was, with problems like the beaver dam, it was very helpful, but other problems was more locally identified problems, such as like a culvert at this intersection in this town with these streets, seemed to kind of escape the plan, because it was the picture was too big. So this 5-year cycle, it was decided that we were gonna go individual town to towns and distribute those plans to the surrounding communities, so that way communities could see what towns were looking at, what hazards were identified in their towns that could potentially impact this town and vice versa, for more of a, not such a regional base, but more like a local community base that can share, and through that sharing, it sort of becomes, there's regionally identified plans, or excuse me, hazards.
Okay, thank you.
I guess I just have one question. Do we wanna put this, want me to send this to you so we can have some comments from the board and then put it out publicly in a week? Or do we wanna put it out for public comment and take the board's comments in that same 14-day period?
Should be fine at the same time.
I'm okay with doing it at the same time.
Not that I have anything
But
to hide, I just wanna.
I guess all it would mean is that the general public would know that there's the potential that the board would request something be modified, so it's
Yeah.
not necessarily the last one you're seeing before we submit to the state or the federal government.
Okay,
But,
so want me to stand by?
we'll send it along so we can look at it, and again, I don't mind if you send it out to the public, cause they can also let us know what they think, you know,
Yeah,
they might
exactly.
see something we don't, so.
We can
I'd
start-
rather that than draw out the comment period, you know what I mean?
Right.
Is it required that the public see the final draft before it's sent, or they just have the opportunity to comment on this draft as we do? In other words,
The requirement is that there's a 14-day public period before it goes to meeting. So that's sort of,
so if it's altered, it has to go back before that 14-day period?
yes.
Okay. So, yeah, I mean, may as well do it concurrent.
Well, I
If we
mean, it's
don't-
really,
If we don't
if
ask
you-
to change it, then
if
it's.
you put it out to
just do it again.
the 14-day public comment period and changes are made, it doesn't have to go back out to the 14-day public comment period.
You don't have to
Oh, it doesn't.
restart the 14
No,
days.
no.
Oh, okay.
But like if we put it out, let's say, 6 months ago, I would recommend that it goes back out for public comment, cause there's probably some substantial changes that were made.
I think if there's any changes, they'd be minor, if there's any. I
Right.
don't anticipate any
That's
necessarily. but-
typically, there's very few, usually it's a typo here and there, or, this street is this street, or something like that. It's usually never too much stuff, cause this plan's been worked on for roughly 3
I
months.
think concurrent's the wise way to go and keep it moving. There's no
Okay.
need to delay it.
Yeah, so,
Anything else?
no, thank you. Thank you very much, Peter.
Thank you, I apologize for taking a bit more of your time than
Well,
anticipated.
we took the extra time, but we appreciate it.
You're welcome. I have a sign-in sheet here, if anybody wants to sign in. Pass it around, if not, it's fine.
Did you get emails and stuff about all of it?
Yeah, you can put your name on the list. I have some handouts too that kind of sum up what I went over. I'll give that a minute to go around. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm ready for the minutes if you want.
Have you had a chance to review the minutes? Do you wanna,
Hmm?
do you wanna go back to the meeting minutes? Greg said he's
I've read them,
comfortable with
I don't know if you want to, or,
Yeah,
Otherwise.
they're pretty accurate and straightforward. So how many applicants are we up to total for the bylaw, the marijuana bylaw committee?
8 plus 9.
9, we're gonna put 7, so we'll do a 7 and 2 alternates maybe.
Did we write a number in the draft charge?
7.
You emailed out?
7. That's just rereading it.
Yeah, 7 is
whatever you wanna do when it's unwritten.
7 max, but
You
we
wanna
can do.
make a motion on the minutes?
Yeah, I don't have the date on hand, December 17th, was it?
Yes.
Yep.
Make a motion, we approve the minutes for December 17th.
Second.
Call for a vote.
Aye.
Aye.
Right.
Thank you.
If I have them back, I'll sign them.
You want these?
I'll sign it.
Excuse me.
Thank you.
Meeting minutes are done, let's get into the marijuana bylaw review committee.
I'm sorry, 22nd.
Yes, do it.
We start with the charge and then we'll go to the appointments. Before we get into it, I'd just like to start with, I got an anonymous letter, no return address. I just wanted to read it so it's out there, so I have a chance to possibly respond if they're interested. It started with, for your information, many townspeople are very upset that the proposed members that the select board is in favor of for the marijuana committee. All the members are associated with Mr. Iandoli marijuana business person or are for marijuana. Yes, there are 2 proposed members from Q Drug, but one of them has been meeting with Mr. Iandoli and you. How can you say you select board, you/select board are impartial? So disappointing and concerning. The first thing is, in the answer to the potential committee members, because I think we were pretty clear last meeting that we weren't ready to make any decisions. We weren't saying we're favoring anybody. We had some discussions and we left it at that, and we had some questions regarding potential conflicts of interest to make sure that everybody wasn't unknowingly setting themselves up for a conflict of interest if they participated, so we had asked for some legal counsel on that. Comes back, legal counsel said there was no issue. So anybody that was originally on the list, we found no issue with any of them participating and having any potential issues with conflicts of interest. If you did have a business interest or similar that would come after this or is occurring at the same time, you would just have to submit a conflict of interest statement to the town clerk. So with that said, we covered that. Now in regards to 2 of the members are from Q Drug, but one of them has been meeting with Mr. Iandoli and I. The answer to that is yes, that is true. When people from the community ask to speak to me, I usually answer, show up, and we'll meet them and talk to them about various issues that are of their concern in town. Mr. Iandoli did request that I meet him. I also did meet with Neeker. I listened to what they had to say. They had some thoughts about some of the bylaws coming up at the special town meeting. I listened, we talked, and I did give them an idea of where I stood, but I left it at that. And I walked away, and then we had the meeting. We all know the results of the meeting now. I just thought when you get elected and you represent the town, when someone calls you, try to answer and listen and talk to the people. So that's why I did it. I have no financial interest in the industry at all. I'm not connected to anything. I have no connections to, so the best I can do is say, I'm just trying to represent those that come to me and ask to say, hey, this is something that's on my mind. So I chose to take the time to meet with them. But if anybody else here in the meeting or do feel that somehow I may have crossed a line by meeting with people, feel free to speak up. I'm more than willing to step aside and let other people choose the members of the board. But
I think
I'll
that
listen to the other board members and what their thoughts are on that.
bottom line is that letter seems to be implying that the people going to be placed on the committee are pro-marijuana, but this is, we put it out to public, ask for volunteers, and this is what we have. So if other people wanted to be on here that have an opposing view, then they needed to come and put their name in. And we've had 9 names in total, and we'll probably put all 9 on, 7 of the committee, and 2 alternates. How we'll determine which 2 will be alternates, I don't know yet. But we haven't cut anybody out of this that's wanted to be on it. And this is, this is the public that stepped forward, and this is what we're left to deal with. It has no impact on us, and as far as we've had no impact in selecting them. This is who came forward.
Yeah, that's the way I feel, and I feel you're meeting with people who you want to meet, who ask you to meet with them. That's well within your purview as a member of the board. I was approached, we never quite made the connections before the town meeting, but, so we didn't meet, but had the connections. Had we made all the arrangements, I probably would have met, but I meet with a lot of people, and I think that's something a board member does. It's not a member just as an individual on the board. That's how you learn about the issues that are going on, and I'm certainly still open to meeting with anybody for or against or in between or not knowing or whatever. But I try to, if I'm asked to meet with somebody, I usually try to accommodate them. And regardless of their views and regardless of mine, I want to hear what people have to say. And if they disagree with me and they want to articulate their view to me, then that's fine too. And so I think you were well within your purview as a member of the board to do what you did.
I didn't touch on that aspect, but I agree as well. I think that anyone that wants to talk to me, I think any of the selectmen should have us available, and we should be available to listen to them. I mean, if people have voted to put us in office, the idea is, in my opinion, is to try to do the will of the people, not to do what we think is right or what we feel like doing, but try to listen to people, their opinions and their views, and what they bring to us is all we can bring back to this board, and try to represent that as best we can. So I would encourage all these boards to talk to anyone who wants to talk to them whenever they can. We certainly can't meet two of us and talk to somebody, that's a quorum, and we can't do that. That would have to be done in public. But privately, the more people we talk to, the better we, get our hand on the pulse of what's going on in town and what people want. So I think it's the right thing to do.
Well, all right then. Let's continue. What I'd like to do is I'm going to, not quite speed read, but I'm going to go through the charge pretty quickly to get it out there, and then we can discuss it and decide whether we want to approve it. The charge for the Barre Marijuana Bylaw Review Committee, Barre, Massachusetts. The Board of Selectmen of the Town of Barre hereby charges the Barre Bylaw Review Committee with the following responsibilities and duties. The election of officers, including at least a chairman and secretary. The recording of minutes and votes of all meetings as prescribed by the open meeting law. Minutes are to be signed by the secretary of the committee upon approval of committee, and copies of the minutes submitted to town clerk as prescribed by town bylaw. The committee shall comply with the open meeting law and the uniform procurement law. The committee shall be governed by the conflicts of interest laws. The committee shall be composed of no more than 7 regular members. Members will be appointed by the Board of Selectmen with terms expiring on June 30th of each year. The Barre Marijuana Bylaw Review Committee will disband at the passage of marijuana bylaws at town meeting. The committee shall review the bylaws presented at December 11, 2018 special town meeting. The committee may mark up and provide comments on the bylaws drafted by the Board of Selectmen and Planning Board relative to general bylaws and zoning bylaws. The committee will present the final recommendations of their review to both the Board of Selectmen and Planning Board prior to April 1st, 2018. The committee is encouraged to reach out to various stakeholders, including residents, business owners, and potential developers, for input on proposed bylaws relative to marijuana use. The committee will recommend changes to the bylaw to make them efficient for administration and development. The Board of Selectmen may disband the committee if they deem it necessary. That's a typo.
Or it's unnecessary.
That is true. We could disband you if we deem you unnecessary, deem it anyway. This charge may be amended by the Board of Selectmen at any time. So,
Board of Selectmen may disband the committee. I'd end it there. We don't need to say
yeah,
anything.
it's,
But what does, I don't care if it stays or not, it doesn't really
I
matter.
had another typo, it's April 1st, 2019.
Yes.
all right. Right now, excuse me, sir, could you tell me your name again?
Armin Jansen?
Thank you, Armin. It will sink in.
Sorry?
I will remember one of these days.
Not required.
Is that A-R-M-E-N?
ARMENJANZEN.
Thank you, sir. Just wanted to add it to the list that we received. So, do we have a motion on this charge? Do we want to adjust the 7 regular members to some alternates? I guess the benefit to that is it usually helps them maintain a quorum if they want to have multiple meetings to keep this going through the couple months. But other than that, it's 7 members is 7 members. The alternates can also just show up at every meeting and give their input if they want. I don't
just not voting unless there's someone
Yeah,
missing.
I mean, I'm not opposed to the concept of alternates, but I guess the real benefit there is just making sure they have quorums. So,
Yeah, I think that's a smart way to go. That way, you know, if two alternates show and two members don't, they still have seven, they can continue on with whatever they're doing and vote. Whether we'd have to spell out that an alternate can fill in whenever the regular member's not there. But only when the regular member's not there. In other words, if the member's back the next week, the alternate's back out, just allow them to proceed if they needed to vote. Or do we want to make it as the alternate is only there if a member steps down? You see, there's two ways to run it. If
I would
'cause to
consider
fill
that
in-
more of an applicant in holding. But,
you know, because truly an alternate won't be used unless somebody's removed.
do you have a
If you
thought?
thought of a jury
Yeah, I
pool,
think-
for example. The alternates would attend everything
You
in a
mean
jury.
regarding the alternates?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't see anything.
Go ahead and do the 7+2.
What?
Do 7+2?
Yeah.
Okay. We'll make that revision, just 7 members plus 2 alternates. The alternates are only fill in for a quorum or fill in when one of the 7 aren't?
I'd say if they need a quorum for vote, an alternate steps in.
Okay. So the alternate only has voting privileges at the point it's required to maintain a quorum, is my understanding of what,
Yes.
okay.
To ensure they can keep a vote. And of course, we need to modify the date to 2019, and we can modify line 8 or leave it. We can say the Board of Selectmen may disband the committee.
Well, that's actually.
We can see it unnecessary, necessary, or just. Yes. That should be item 9, and that should be item 10, so the numbering is wrong on the left as well.
All right, so for item
We
5.
have 8, 8, 9.
Would just be add the 2 alternates who have voting privileges when a quorum is required, or they're needed to fill out a quorum.
Line 7. The year to 19.
Line 7, change that to 2019. April 1st, 2019, not 2018.
Change the second line 8 to line 9.
And then just finish out the numbering.
And just leave the wording as it is on. I mean, it's not crucial whether it's phrased one way or the other. But it could just say the Board of Selectmen may disband the committee.
Honestly, I'm fine with
I don't think.
how
it
it's
does
written
that.
works as well, so I'm okay with that.
Alright.
Not worrying about that, but if you want it, we can revise that.
It doesn't matter the other way either.
Okay.
Pending the changes we discussed, I make a motion, we approve the charge. for the
Second.
bylaw committee.
Call for vote.
Aye?
Aye.
Aye. So did everybody understand the changes we were discussing there? They were generally minor, a couple typos, but one was just making it a 7-member board with 2 alternates. Those alternates can vote when needed to maintain a quorum. The idea here is you really do just have 2 months to get through this, try to have as many meetings as you guys think you can put together to create some good thoughtful content, send back comments, whether you want to mark up the bylaw and approve it as a board, or whether you want to, if you just can't agree on something, provide like a pro and con type of an opinion on certain items of it. The idea here is we're trying to just see if you can help bridge the gap that was there that prevented the bylaws from passing the last couple times. So I would
Brief
love
discussion.
for you guys to do that, but now we would have to choose people.
That's what I was gonna say, we can look at the 9 members. We can see if there's volunteers of 2 that would prefer to be an alternate, or if we want to pick 2 as an alternate, we could simply say, select them in order they came to us and have the last 2 be alternates. There's a lot of possible ways to do this. I don't think it's fair to just send all 9 to the committee and let them vote. They're gonna vote for a head of the committee, but to have them vote for alternates is,
No, I agree there.
I'd rather not put that on them. So either we choose one or we ask for volunteers for alternates.
I agree with that. Is there anybody else that you would like,
You have a
still you
question
would
in the
wanna
audience?
speak to? I know that there were
Ms.
a
Emmett has
couple
question.
missing last week that maybe we didn't get to talk to, or,
Kathy Emmett was asking a question.
did you have a question, Kathy? I'm sorry.
No,
Okay.
thank you. It's just, I have to go to a meeting in 2 minutes. So
We're gonna
if
try to
you-
wrap this up in
Okay,
2 minutes then.
Thank you.
Okay, it looks like right now we have 9 people when we include Armin. So now we've got to identify what 2 are, of any of the 9 that are here, would you rather participate as an alternate? Where you're more part of the discussion unless more effort is warranted, or are all of you right now just full force? I'd like to just be a standing member.
As I understand what you've said, all 9 people can contribute to the discussion.
Right.
2 only vote in the case of the requirement for a quorum.
Correct.
But so if you opt to be an alternate, you can still speak and try to influence things whichever way you want, or facilitate.
You should still be respected as a member of the committee when it comes to discussions on the floor.
And a
Yes.
voting quorum before, so unless there's less than 4 members, the alternates wouldn't have a vote anyways, but they'd be in the discussion.
Oh, really?
It'd take
Right.
4 for votes. If you had 3 members,
Right.
then you'd have an alternate to make the 4th for the vote, so.
4 out of 9?
4 to 7. The board will be 7,
Oh,
so a
gotcha,
quorum will be
gotcha.
4.
Okay.
So only when we drop less than 4 would the alternates fill in for voting. But to be involved in the discussion is probably, what's most important to this anyways.
No. But either way, it's the input that's more important, and we definitely want all 9 members to be involved, so that's why we brought it up, because originally a 9-member board's a really difficult board to manage. I mean, 7's kind of big when you're trying to get something done in 2 months. But, town's diverse. You can't just put a 3-member board up there and think you're gonna do any better than this 3-member board. So, we needed the input. So,
Should we talk to our
we're gonna
boss?
have to go through this and figure out, we can either draw numbers and make it really non-biased, where we just put numbers in a hat. Are all 9 members here?
We haven't interviewed Armin,
I
we haven't
count
interviewed
1,
Jane.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
9.
She was one of the ones I counted.
Oh.
Are you one?
Yeah, Jane.
No, in the back row. No?
No, so we could put you on another committee.
You are. Thank you. Ellie was hiding you from me. I couldn't.
Maybe
All
there's only
right.
a couple
Thank
we
you.
haven't interviewed or we
Sorry
don't
about
know.
that. Well, if there's anybody you're not comfortable with, you don't know, you didn't get a chance to interview, then we'll let you know, Kathy. Thank you very much for coming. Sorry. Name them, and we'll see if you got any questions, or if they want to just explain why they want to, then just name the one that you're more.
Oh, just we haven't talked to Jane and Armin, we haven't interviewed them to
Okay.
see what they have to say. We question the other people, let them introduce themselves, give them the same chance, but
And you, Charlie, last week you mentioned maybe you wanted to meet Becky. Was that right? The name that didn't ring a bell?
Yeah.
Maybe it was someone else. Maybe it was me that was saying Becky. All right, let's start with that. Becky, since you're at the top of the list,
Yes.
could you just give us a quick little, why do you want to be on the committee?
I think there's a lot of benefits to having the revenue come into the town. I'm a new resident to the town, and I'd like to be involved in the process. I've witnessed firsthand what Leicester goes through, just even driving through the town. So I think I have some good input as to what is going on in other towns.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay.
I think Ralph was here last week. Chris wasn't here last meeting.
Yep.
Why would you like to be on the committee?
I'm looking at it as a business, obviously a business owner in town. I'm a member of the board of directors for the Barre business community. It's a business. I think it's not I'm not a user, so I feel a little awkward doing this, but it's business, and I think Barre needs all the business we can get.
Okay. Lily, Kathy. Tom, were you here last meeting? Why would you?
So I've been involved in this ever since it kind of started in Barre, working with CPC on certain aspects of their proposal, and I'm a business owner in town too, and I kind of have a similar feeling as Chris, that Barre should lose out on potential revenue and business growth in the community. So the responsibly proposed bylaw could really benefit it for the town.
Okay. Neeker, I do believe you didn't get a chance. Most people know you, but could you explain why you would like to be on the committee?
I think the biggest part of why I'd like to be on the committee is just to keep the prevention in terms of youth prevention and protecting youth in the forefront of what we're looking at when we look at the bylaws. Not that we're trying to keep it out of town entirely, but how do we make sure that if we're bringing something like tobacco or like alcohol, another thing like that into our community that is an addictive substance, how are we protecting youth? So.
Okay. Thank you. Jane?
I think it's more or less where I work at the senior center. You know, I listen to all, you know, their thoughts and ideas, and they have a lot of them. I mean, I understand that they're afraid of the, you know, somebody coming in and just, you know, opening a storefront and that, but I mean, I'm not against it.
Okay.
I'm not against it at all.
So you could bring some of that,
Oh, yeah.
the voice from the senior center and
Right.
the different perspective you get from there.
Mhm.
All right. No, I appreciate that. Armin?
I'll echo what everybody else has said, really, and I think that it's necessary to have this income stream for the city. I was a labor negotiator for 20 years and then formed a business mediation firm. And what I did was both for the Superior Municipal Courts and in my own firm, facilitate agreements. I don't know what the logjam is, why this language has not worked, or what the resistance is, but my whole forte as a mediator for the last 15 years was to facilitate agreement, language that pleases both parties as a neutral.
Well, thank you. Do you need any refreshers from the previous meeting?
No, I don't think so. I don't recall Becky, though.
She's off to the left.
Oh, we just talked to Becky, okay, that's why I don't recall it from last time, we just talked to her this time. That's the name that didn't stand out.
So do we want to choose the 7 or choose the 2?
Well, my first thought was to just do the easy way out and just take the last 2 and put them on reserve, but listen to Armand speak, I think that is exactly what our holdup is on this, is the opposing sides. I think his input would be very helpful looking at the regulations, so I'd like him included because of that. And the same thing with Chris. Saying a non-user and a businessman is certainly a good perspective. That's pro-business and pro-marijuana, but not as a user. I like that perspective, and I would like for sure to see Chris on the committee. That'd be my opinion on 2 that I definitely want on the committee. And if I threw a 3rd in, it would be Neeker for a 3rd, because I think that, you know, her perspective is strictly for caution, not trying to prevent it, but caution towards it. I think that's an important voice in there. And, you know, to weight anyone else's opinion more or less is difficult at that point. certainly Miss Inman, being a former selectman, has a lot of contacts in town and a lot of knowledge of people, is probably a good foreman. I'll keep throwing them out there, I can prioritize them, I'm up to 4. I can leave you guys the last 3 if you like my 4. But,
Is there a way to make the committee larger than 4? Or is that-
Well, the committee's gonna be
It's a
7.
committee of 7 plus 2 alternates, so it's already 9 members. It's the quorum that was 4.
Oh, was there any way to make the quorum larger than 4, or is that not approved?
I think you get to a certain point where it's not very effective. When you get too many people, you spend a lot of time talking,
Too
but
much
then
constant.
2 months go on and you feel like you've made no progress in any of them.
Because you have
You
to-
gotta, somehow you've gotta also identify what's important to the group and then act on what you can do about those items. So it's, the more people, the more important items, so it does make it harder
You
to
know.
get something done, and we're trying to make it so that we can get their comments back, so both the Board of Selectmen and Planning Board have time to review it, and potentially, hopefully, incorporate some of the suggestions, so we can try to present bylaws that we think the town's gonna approve.
See, so I've recommended a former selectman, I've recommended somebody good with rules. Chris, a strictly businessman, non-user, Nika for opposing, and if we keep going that, I would think that Tom Donahue is more affiliated with Iandoli, and that will put a voice on the other side of that as well. I mean, if we're putting an opposed voice with Nika, we put Tommy in there, who's, you know, been affiliated with Dean for years, and that gives a fair voice on the other side as well. Now we're up to 5. And I think the remaining 4 are gonna be general, good public, I mean, they're here, and they wanna help, which is good, and it's public input. Everybody seems non-biased. No one seems to oppose it, and everyone seems to want to be cautious about it, so I think the remaining 4,
Right.
I don't have a preference. But I would certainly say I prefer those 5. If you don't stop me, I'll have the whole 7 soon, you guys will have.
No, I'm coming up with my own list, it's close.
I think the rationale behind the first 5 I recommend, I think, is solid. And I think the remaining 4, we're gonna have good input no matter what we do, and it's going to be general input. It's not gonna be biased one way or the other. But to have somebody who's good with contract negotiations and the settlements is, I think, a windfall for the committee. Having business input for someone who's not necessarily pro-marijuana is good. Because the business aspect of it and how these bylaws affect businesses is important. We can think about this end, but without running a business, especially a storefront in town. You know, I've
Well,
done
that's what
business for
Ralph
years.
brings, that's what he said the last meeting was, his employees were having issues with opioids, and he figured that this was an industry he needed to understand better, to know if it was a positive or a negative for the same people that he was concerned with the opioids, which
Maybe that's a good
is
reason to have
similar
number
to
6.
kind of what Neeker's been saying. It's youth or young adults early in employment. Is one actually better than the other when it comes to the quality of life? Let's not say the addictive and the data. I'm not trying to get into that, but everybody has a perspective on the effect it has on the quality of life. And I think that's important to understand.
Maybe that's a good reason to make him number 6.
But I also believe someone like Jane is bringing a perspective that comes from part of the community that doesn't regularly sit in this room. Doesn't mean that they're not involved and they're not talking to people, they're just not necessarily sitting in this room. But she has the ability to kind of bring it to this room through this committee on this particular subject with her connections and the people she knows at the senior center. I think Becky brings a perspective because, were you from Leicester before you moved
No,
here, or just the
no.
traveling through and paying
I
attention
travel
to?
back and forth through there all the time.
Okay.
My daughter works in Auburn, and that's the quickest way through.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I've seen it since week one all the way through now. My husband has been in the shop, and he has described it to me in detail. I know what their policies are. I've visited their website. From that perspective, I think I can tell you what you would be able to expect.
I got you, yeah.
Because you can't really prepare yourself for it, unless you have actually seen it firsthand.
True. Okay. I have to admit, 2 alternates is not easy to choose. I really do see the benefit of each person here. But I do think we need to choose 2 alternates. What I'm looking at right now for my final draft of the 7, and this isn't in any particular order, it's just I wrote them down in an odd order anyway, I had Tom, I had Neeker, I had Chris, I had Armin, I had Kathy, I had Hillary, and I had Jane. Which would at the moment leave Ralph and Becky as the alternates.
I would be completely fine with that as long as I still get to go to the meetings.
You do. You would be, outside of voting privileges, the same privileges of everybody member in the committee. So they should work with you to make sure you know, like, when meetings are happening, you know, that whole process, that none of this, let's have a meeting, nobody knows out. I don't want to hear that, okay? I don't care who you choose as chairman, please make sure everybody knows when the meetings are and try to make sure everybody can make them as much as possible. I understand you can't do it all, that's why we chose the alternates, that way maybe if you do 2 meetings a week, I don't know, maybe someone makes a Tuesday, maybe someone makes a Friday, you know, because you can't choose the one day a week where all 7 of you can make it. You know, it doesn't necessarily mean you plan to vote every time, but at least you can work it out. I'll leave that to you guys. You figure it out. Because I really would appreciate whoever ends up being the alternate still participates as much as they can, because I really do think it's going to be very valuable to all 9 members. Do you guys have thoughts with that, or the 2 alternates? I'm okay if you think we should rotate a couple. You think a different one of my alternates, which on the list was Becky and Ralph, maybe you think you should switch one of them with the 7 I thought to keep. I'm more than willing to listen, and don't get me wrong, after this letter, I'm more than willing if someone says switch them. I'm not gonna push anything here.
My thought was to switch Hillary for Ralph, keep Ralph on and have Hillary be the other alternate.
Okay.
Okay, well, I think we ought to go down through the ones we agree on. I had thought Ralph should be on the committee. Otherwise, I agreed with you, and Armin, where he was an arbitrator, might be in a perfect spot to be one of the alternates.
Okay.
That was my thinking on it. It's really not necessarily one over the other, but otherwise,
Okay.
we agree on.
So you were thinking Ralph instead of Armin. Ralph would be on it,
Yeah.
Armin would be an alternate.
That's what I was thinking.
And you were thinking Ralph instead of Hillary, like switching those 2. So it sounds like 2 out of the 3 want Ralph on, which is fine.
2 out of 3 want Armin on.
But 2 out of 3 want Armin on,
Okay.
which I guess. So we've got
Becky and Hillary alternate.
Becky and Hillary as an alternate, unless for some reason you thought rotating them also would be, I mean, Hillary comes with the PTO, parent-teacher organization. But I think she's also been vocal stating that it's not like because I got kids, you know, I'm all against marijuana. I mean, she's been balanced with how she's represented herself, I believe, in things I've seen. So I'm not trying to imply PTO means anything. That's all I meant to say. I'm sorry. You know what? I'm gonna sit back. If you guys could just choose the second alternate, I'm gonna say okay. So right now we have Becky as an alternate.
Okay. And who again was your other alternate?
I was gonna have Hillary be the other alternate, and include Armand on the committee.
Okay, well. Okay. All right, then I'll go along with that.
Okay, so I'm hearing it right. Becky and Hillary right now are the two proposed alternates.
Yes.
All right. Do we have a motion?
I make a motion, we appoint the 7 members we discussed to the committee, and the 2 alternates being Becky and Hillary. If we need to read all 7 names, you can do that, but.
Okay, I'll second.
Okay. So, call for a vote.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, so the committee as voted is Ralph Rogers, Chris Higgins, Kathy Inman, Tom Donahue, Nika Jenkins, Jane Day, Armin Jansen, and the 2 alternate members are Becky LaVenture and Hillary Strickland.
It's Budra.
You gotta change that. Budra.
B-U-D-R-E-A-U.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Get that fixed. I would like to say thank you very much for all of those that are gonna be on this. Just please make sure you, is this saying check in with the town clerk and
Get a copy of the
swear on the
charge.
Bible type thing or something?
Yeah, swear
Okay.
in office, and if there's any, if you have any financial
Oh,
interests that are related to it, need to be disclosed.
so yes.
That means the other part of this was special municipal employees. I have no objection to the designation if you wish.
I wish to do it. It sounded like they didn't need to. They just need to file the conflict of interest.
Okay.
I just think by doing it though, it just gives them one more potential protection. Because that's pretty much all it does is protect the members from, whether it's the 1-year rule and other things like that, it doesn't always come into play if you're a special municipal. So, is that something you would like to propose? Or
Sure,
you're- or-
I'll make a motion, we appoint this committee of special municipal employees, all 9 members.
Second.
Call for vote?
Aye.
Aye. You still need to fill out your disclosures of interest if you have any potential financial benefits from this role, now or in the future. If you have any known intent to apply for business related to this, you may want to make sure you put in a disclosure of conflict of interest. Perceived.
Copy of the charge.
Yes, we'll have the charge that was approved ready, what, by tomorrow?
Yes.
And do you have everybody's email address? Or a way to contact everybody via email?
I have some.
Can that be signed electronically for us, or?
Well,
Do you wanna come in and do
it's, in some manner, it's
Well, they just need.
You need to get a copy of the
They
charge.
need a copy of the charge.
I think if anybody's gotten to know me, the charge matters to me. So, make sure you have a copy of the charge. They can either be gotten in hard copy from Andrew, or if you give him his email, your email address, he can email you a copy of it as well.
Can we also get a copy of the bylaws?
Yes,
Yeah, that's all go out tomorrow.
thank you. So yes,
Zoning and.
two, the
ours.
zoning and the general bylaw for licensing are both part of this scope. So together, and the
make
fact
sure
that they
everyone
are
gets a
to
copy,
work
please.
together. So whether one poses a conflict to another and we didn't see it, it's something I would be interested in hearing from all of you.
Mine is for him,
And I'd appreciate it.
you know.
So,
Do you wanna see if they can set a kickoff meeting now? We'll get everybody in the room.
well, that's up to all of you. Kathy's not here, but everyone else, if you're interested in setting up or trying to discuss when you think you could have your first meeting, at that meeting, you'll vote for your chairman, your secretary, et cetera, and probably try to set up your plan of action.
Then you just deal with Andrew for setting up a room here for it.
Can we meet in
Make
the
sure-
hallway so you guys can move on to the next?
Yes, I am fine with that.
And then we go to the town administrator.
Yeah, but-
Swear in.
Town clerk.
This one.
Town
Yeah.
clerk will swear you in, town administrator should have the charge for you tomorrow, and hopefully, copies of the bylaws for all of you tomorrow. And then, you'd contact him to make arrangements for a room for your meetings, to post them and have rooms.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
This particular item has.
Good luck. Walking into our world of the last 6 months. Oh.
What specific item are you looking to?
I'm here with the police. I'm assuming you're thinking of the principal at Auburn Regional Middle School?
Oh, the school resource.
Yes.
Okay, then.
Next up anyway.
Let's do that right away.
You ready for it?
Yes, we are.
We are. That went smoothly, as long as it took you went smooth. I'm happy.
Good evening.
Evening.
I have given Andrew a copy, but only tonight, of the agreement, the proposed MOU between the school district and the town or the police department as required by statute. Statute requires that we have two things, an MOU and then to come more or less a job description, standard operating procedures document. We haven't written that yet. We have written this. Now, what this basically is there is a template sent out by the Commonwealth, adopted by the Mass Chiefs of Police and sent out to all chiefs of police, so we wouldn't have to create a document from scratch. And it's a memorandum of agreement between us and the school for the purpose of having an SRO, which, as you know, well, everyone's required to have
Hold on
one.
one second. You want to join us up front, please?
What do you mean everyone's required to have one?
Yeah, they're saying unless you can show a reason in the Commonwealth why your community
Thank
can't
you.
afford one, you have to have one.
Oh, okay.
So, when you look at this, anything that's bold-faced is actually required by statute, but all of the rest, minus anything that we've adjusted to fit the town of Barre, is recommended. So there are things that have been taken out, and there are just things that have been adjusted to the type of school, the type of program that we have. At any rate, it's required that we sign this at some point, so I put it forth. It's already been brought to the school committee, they've already reviewed it, and they've already signed it, so that's half of it, and then it has to be signed by me. I'm waiting for you guys to, and I would like for you to take a look at it, and then, if there's anything that you don't like about it, let me know, and otherwise, I'd like to go ahead and sign it. Highlights basically are, Chief of Police has sole discretion to appoint the SRO. The school has the right to question that appointment, but they don't have the right to change it. They also have the right to evaluate the performance of the SRO at the end of the year and bring any concerns to me regarding that. There are things like complaint procedures. Nothing can violate the contract that the officers have in terms of that. And it just basically discusses qualifications. when one of the things that's key is they wanted to legislate a way to prevent chiefs from just putting anybody in. And so like there's a clause in there that says you can't be promoted by seniority, or picked by seniority. They want to make sure that that's a good fit. And there's all other language suggesting or requiring that they have some sort of knowledge or training in areas that would be beneficial, like working with youth and things like that. So, you know, all of it makes perfect sense. Requires that the school provide an office, which they do. It actually offers $2,000 in money towards SRO training every year as part of the agreement.
Off the cuff, my feeling is this is an agreement between the police, which is your purview, and the school, which is your purview. There's no place for us to sign, so while it's good that we have knowledge of this, I don't think our approval is necessary.
Our approval of his policy is required.
Before he signs his policy for the school.
Yeah, he can't just make up policies without some approval from
Right,
the
so we have
select
the
board
30
because
days.
he's a branch of the administrative wing. That's my understanding with, am I wrong? Police policies still require the Board of Selectmen's approval? Even with his strong chief rules, he still has
Usually
a,
what happens is the chief submits it to the board has a period of time to act on it, and if they don't, then it's automatically adopted.
30 days.
All right.
30 days.
but we have the right to act on it to say, no, we don't like it.
Sure. But, yes. But with
That's
regard-
kind of what I meant, I guess, is we have a
Are
voice
you
in the
looking at the
process.
school resource officer?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I don't think that falls into that category. That's just a agreement between, that's not a policy, is it? I haven't seen.
Yeah, it requires him and the superintendent to review annually together. It
It's an
writes
review.
procedure for what they're gonna do. It's policy.
Okay. I guess you could see it as that. I would see it as an agreement between the town and the regional school district for a resource officer in accordance with state statute. There's a state statute that deals with this. And so I think that what it requires is a simple majority vote of the Board of Selectmen to approve it from their perspective, as opposed to treating it as a general policy. Now, I haven't seen the document. I mean, if you want me to take a look at it for 2 minutes, I can tell you what I think. If it's written up as a policy, that's one thing, but typically they aren't. I have school resource officers in numerous municipalities and school systems that I represent, and it's fairly common.
So it requires our approval before the chief can sign it?
Yeah,
Is it an MOU?
Can I look at the document?
And that's the other part, is an MOU, then it becomes an agreement and it's contractual, which is another reason why it requires us.
So the last part of that allows us to break it, but we have to give them 30 days notice that we're going to end.
Okay.
That gives them a chance to argue as to why they think we should keep it.
Okay.
That's about the only thing in there that's binding.
Yeah. I have a question. Now, this individual would be at the school all the time? or-
Well, it's no change from what we're doing now. He works at
Okay.
4-2, and when his days on are weekdays, he's at the school.
Oh, I see.
Unless he happens to be in training or something like that. Sometimes his days off are in the middle of the week and he's just not there.
Yep.
We're not changing that.
Okay, now how, we're paying, the town of Barre pays for the position?
It's a regular police officer and we've assigned him to the school already.
Okay.
And again, we can pull the SRO out at any time, we just, according to this MOU, and that's state recommended language, we have to give them 30 days.
Okay.
Really, that gives them a chance to come to your meeting to argue, counter to removing the SRO.
Gotcha.
Is it mandatory that he's there per this agreement on his work days and weekdays, or can he be used for something else if needed during the school day?
No, there's no, it says he'll be assigned there, but in any emergency situation, and there can be any number of things, like manpower shortage or something like that, I don't think we're bound. He leaves the school for emergencies.
See, my opinion is the more I hear of it, we have a police chief who we have trust in to do his job, and the school personnel are elected, and the school committee is elected, is outside of us completely. And I like to meddle in these affairs as little as we can. So if we need to vote on it, then I think we should, but if we don't need to, I think it's nice that it's brought to our attention and we're aware of it, but if council says we don't need to vote on it, I don't think we should.
I can't tell you tonight whether you do or don't in the municipalities I represent. The Board of Selectmen did vote, and as well as the school committee, as opposed to the superintendent. But I think that if you don't have any issue with the content, it's very extensive. I haven't reviewed it, but I did glance through the document. The chief said he used a state model for this particular document. Some of the ones I'm familiar with are much, much shorter. But you can get out of this agreement pretty easily if you choose to. So maybe what you should do is simply to vote to authorize the chief to sign this agreement on behalf of the Board of Selectmen. And if you do that, then it becomes immaterial whether it should have been done by you or simply by the chief.
And then we still have 30 days from that point to have alterations or to cancel it if we
I don't think
disagree.
so.
No, what we'd be able to do is enact 30 days and say we're gonna rewrite this if we were that strong, like.
Right.
Yeah, right.
You can pull out of it, but we have to give them 30 days notice to respond at any time.
But we can't pull out of it, you can pull out of it
Well,
once it's
I
approved.
can pull out of it, sure, as a strong chief. I'm pretty sure you can pull me out of it if you choose to, because I answer to you, so.
Probably.
It's a balance.
But that's a point of what I try to avoid.
If either party wanted to cancel this, what is the notice required?
30 days.
Well, then I think you have very little notice.
Okay. In that case, I'd make a motion, we approve the chief, authorization for the chief to sign the document.
I'll second that.
Call for vote?
All right?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sue.
Appreciate it. Thank you, chief. See you in a little bit.
Just wanted to tell you something that goes along with this, just it'll take 1 minute. We're gonna be a pilot program for it's not been done in Massachusetts before, but for $1,000 tuition, our SRO is gonna be trained by AAA to be a driver's ed instructor. It's not been done before, but they were fully in agreement to do it. The school, according to this agreement, will fund the training in terms of the tuition costs, and then they're in talks about how they're going to utilize that with the student body in terms of offering a driver's education program, which at some level, whether it's just a basic safety course or whether they're going to go the whole 9 yards, something like that would be an extreme benefit to the kids.
Having 4 kids that went through it, it's a big challenge getting to Gardner and back to get the driving lessons, the time in. It would be a great benefit to have it here.
Thank you.
Thank you much.
Yeah. We have, I wasn't sure we were going to do this right now or towards the end.
Just get
Why
it.
not?
We have, thank you. So we have 3 openings for full-time, and the decision, as we've discussed, meaning Andrew and I, is we're gonna hold one position until July 1st till the fiscal year, as cost savings against, any incurred overtime. We're using a lot of part-time help right now to fill our slots. We interviewed, there's an officer who's in the academy right now. He's a part-timer for us, but he paid his way to the academy. And he looks like a good hire. And then we interviewed someone today who lives in Hubbardston, graduated from Quabbin, and has been through the part-time academy, has been working for a year in Groton. And those, I would like to get permission to make a conditional offer of employment to each of those gentlemen. We would not pay for the academy, we'd start paying him while he's in the academy at the rate of the...
What's the name of the guy in Groton?
So the guy from Groton is Cody Chick. Played football at Quabbin, graduated Quabbin, and I think he said 2013. And then the officer that's at the academy, you've already hired him as a part-timer, Samuel Rivera. That would be 2, so one would be provisional, he'd jump right into the schedule, that'd be Cody Chick. So that would be immediate relief to the officer that just left. and Rivera would graduate right around the time that we were, getting ready to go into the new fiscal year, but he'd be ready to go. Both would sign into an agreement, a 3-year binding agreement that they'd have to pay back their costs. That would be one reason for getting Rivera now, because then would there be some meat to the agreement, even though we don't have to pay for the academy. So I'd like to make conditional offers to those guys on the condition that they sign the agreement that the council is drafting and the union agreed to. Then we had a gentleman come in for part-time. He's an excellent candidate. He's done 15 years in the service. He's done a couple of tours. He's back in the area. He's graduating the part-time academy in a few days. We interviewed him. He looks like an excellent choice for part-time. And I'd like to get his name is Patrick Gillespie. He's just a really good find. So I'd like to get authorization to hire him, conditional upon him passing his background, and as well as the other two.
Okay. I have probably met the candidate from Groton, not familiar, not friends with him, don't really know him, but I'm sure I've met him in passing. I just want to state that up front, but I have no affiliations or ties with him. My last
I have no problems with it.
I don't either.
2.5 months is working at the police station, so.
I'll make a motion to approve the 3 hires proposed by the chief.
Second?
Second.
Call for a vote.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, chief.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I remember meeting him recently, right near the end of my work there, but I don't know any of them personally too well.
Again, just a reminder, did we ever find out if the zoning board of appeals actually had an open position?
Alternate position.
Is an alternate position available?
Yes.
Okay. Old business, Dennis Fleming is up for the alternate zoning board of appeals appointment. Currently, he's on the Parks and Recs Planning Board, and is he on the Conservation Commission? And he's a constable.
Constable, yeah,
That's
but
what it
that's
is.
got nothing to do with the town as far as appointments.
Actually, yeah,
Constables appointed through us?
I think they're elected.
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 Yeah.
I just mean it's a town, it's a position, it's not like a consultant or a hired
Okay.
person.
Well, as you
So,
said
I
before,
guess-
we have a position and someone who wants to fill it. I have no problem placing him on it. We have no one else that's applied that I know of, and he's certainly involved and knowledgeable of things in town, so.
The only thing that was, someone asked of me and I didn't even have a
Was how
good
many
answer.
boards, right?
No, it was, how much of the planning board and the zoning board have too much of the same type of general business? Because he should not be holding 2 positions that cover the same material. And technically, he's almost like the appeals board to the planning board, because if for some reason, like a special permit was not issued, they got nowhere else to go.
All right, 'cause it'd be-
And now he's on both
Source.
boards, and the zoning board of appeals actually is someone that's supposed to be able to say, wait, you overstepped your bounds, planning board, we don't agree with your determination. And if you put him in both, you're kind of stacking the deck if it just so happens he doesn't agree with somebody on the other side of the table. It could be perceived that way. And conflict of interest is all more about perception than it is everything else. So,
Yeah, we talked about this way back. We talked about the transfer station being oversight and running the same facility. And the answer I got from the state at the time was if they don't have any vested interest in it financially, there's no problem with it. However, I understand the concern. If they're on the board that initially is going to cause the appeal, you're not really getting an appeal if you're going back in front of some of the same personnel.
see, I don't necessarily agree that like somebody could be Roger Goodell, be his own appeal board. I'm just saying,
Right,
that's my
I
opinion.
think
I'm
that's
just
a
not a
valid
big fan
point.
of that, so.
I think
It's a
if
fine
anybody-
line, in my opinion, whether you had a financial interest or not. To me, it's just, are we giving the town the best chance for a second view of something?
Well, I think if you got a speeding ticket from a police officer, went for a hearing, and the magistrate was the officer that gave you the ticket, you wouldn't like your chances at your appeal very well.
Thankfully, they won't allow that.
But I'm saying, well, there you go, and then we're up the same thing. If somebody sat in front of the zoning board and they were, the planning board, and they were denied an application on something, and one of those members was on their appeal board, I think that would create a problem, so. I didn't think of that aspect of it, but that's a really valid point. I think it might be wise to,
And I like Dennis a lot. I'm not trying to keep him off it. It's just, this is something we gotta think about to protect the town.
me as well.
All
just
it takes
because
is one
it's-
lawsuit and it just wasn't worth the cost. Even if we win, we still paying someone to deal with it.
Yeah, I don't, in all due respect to Dennis, I don't think he should serve on the planning board and the ZBA, because I just think you're setting yourself up for a conflict.
Okay.
I think very highly of him as an individual, and that sort of, all of that, it had no reflection on him, but I just think if the planning board were to turn something down and it would wind up at the ZBA, and he's on both, then, you know, I guess appearance is partway to impropriety, and I realize none of these boards are paid or anything, there's no financial gain here, but I just think it would probably be best if we didn't fill it with a member of the planning board.
I don't think we need to vote on this down at this, we can table
No.
it again, and Andrew can let him know why we made the decision during the week. Or we can talk to him either way, but I don't think there's any need to vote this down, just table it.
All right, but either way, you gotta close the loop with them.
Right.
We gotta let them know that it's not tabled because we plan to go back and
Right.
vote next week.
And Andrew can reach out to him, but if we see him, we could, well, we could plan on having Andrew reach out to him and let him know. It's just it's a legitimate issue. If somebody has an appeal, it's gonna be disheartening to anybody to walk up to their appeal and be sitting across from a board member who just declined it. I think that's setting ourselves up for like a lawsuit, like you said, so.
Do you have anything further to say, Sam?
I just had a question. Can the ZBA operate with 3 people, or is that not possible?
Isn't it
ZBA is.
it is a 3-person board.
So they can
It's just an
operate with 2.
alternate again, in case someone's missing, they can get a balanced board,
Oh,
or
I see. I wasn't sure.
it's a fill-in when you can't reach
Oh, okay.
a full house.
I didn't understand it.
So, okay. So if you could reach out to them and let them know
I
the
didn't
board's
study
thoughts on it.
Robert's Rules of Order very well.
Neither did I. So
But that's why we have discussion.
Learn as you go.
And you've been told that,
Who's that?
that you didn't study, right?
I think, yes, I think you are correct. Yes.
That
is
was
too
a
funny.
rhetorical sort of comment.
Okay, so the next item. Appointment of risk manager.
So with the new OSHA regulations that are being adopted in Massachusetts, this is the notice that we got from Maya here. They're basically looking for every town to appoint a single risk manager, basically be that point of contact, or the primary point of contact, and to manage any of the risk management duties underneath the new regulations. I have taken the OSHA 7,500 course, so I'd be fine with you guys appointing me as the risk manager.
Make a motion, we appoint town administrator Andrew Gillis as risk manager.
We're giving this guy a lot of power.
Second. I thought we could,
Excuse me, before he used to work 70 hours a week, now he has to work 80 hours a week. Are you
It's all right.
prepared?
He asked, you heard him.
He
I'd be
asked?
okay if you appointed me
Just
risk
keep putting
manager.
more stuff on. It's-
And we should give him a raise.
Shh.
It's all right. Yeah, I just want to be able to get back to these guys, so I've already.
I vote no,
I've
because he
already,
might want a raise.
already started some of the groundwork on trying to basically bring us up to the new regulations. I know a lot of the stuff has kind of impacted the fire department. That's new stuff, but thankfully we've already got a lot of that stuff in place that they require. We have some other housekeeping stuff to do that we gotta go through, but.
It shouldn't impact our employees to a great extent, the
No,
OSHA
no,
regs.
it shouldn't, but there's just numerous more regulations that you have to follow now under OSHA.
Do what OSHA says, but ask the state to come in and deal with it for you, because
Do they offer training for free for any of the town departments, like DPW in particular would be a
Yes.
good place to
Yeah.
have?
Maya's been
given-
on top of really offering this stuff the last year and
And
trying to forward
I
that.
think that's the most important thing. That's where our highest risk is for injury, other than obviously firefighting.
Mhm.
But we hardly ever do that, right, chief? We don't go to any fires.
none,
Two today, once.
not in the last 10 minutes, right?
Around the last 6 hours.
What time they get back from Gardner?
2?
Oh, so I didn't miss them by too much.
Alrighty, call for a vote.
Aye.
Aye.
Congratulations.
Andrew has been assigned the risk manager as our liaison to Maya.
I think Bob wanted it. We really should have held off from that. I didn't see his-
He already got emergency
I
managed.
didn't see his hand up down there, so.
I thought that's why he showed up, actually.
All right, and the next is an acknowledgement of the receipt of the resignation from the Housing Authority by Grace Yaglu. We received the letter, the town of Barre received a letter, more specifically the town clerk. I regret that I am unable to fulfill my full term on the Barre Housing Authority. The experience has been gratifying. We've had a wonderful team and have served great tenants. So, may I resign from the Barre Housing Authority April 1 or until a successor is qualified. Thank you for your continuing help and patience. Grace Yaglu. I'd like to say, first of all, thank you very much for pretty much volunteering the time and participating on that. It makes a huge difference in a lot of people's lives.
Yes.
So yes, we acknowledge, we accept it. Now, the next item is to put that position on the town election ballot for a 2-year term. Because she wasn't able to finish her term, we need to put it back on the ballot only as a 2-year term. Do I have a motion?
We can also appoint, can't we, in interim?
If we have
If
someone,
somebody
but right
can't
now we
visit.
don't have an interim
Yeah, nobody's
appointment
submitted.
waiting list.
All right, then I'd make a motion, we place that position on the ballot for 2 years, this April.
Second.
Call for vote?
Aye?
Aye.
Aye. We could look for, if somebody's interested in applying as an appointment to that position, to at least fill in the time between now and April. We just need people to put in an application, and then the board can review it and make a decision to fill that temporary spot until we go back to election.
Are we allowed to fill that spot for the remainder of the term if we wanted to by appointment?
My understanding is we did it for the planning board a couple years ago, and somebody said we're allowed to, so I'm guessing this can't be much different. It's a general election office that when it gets vacated, the board of selectmen become the de facto. Unless the state's got some weird rules on the housing authority lately with who can be on it and how many positions are from which. Well, if it's not us, it's probably
I was saying, if somebody wanted to step forward.
the rest of the committee, for all I know. The different members of the different committee might be the ones that would vote it.
All right, well, for now,
But if we
have
could
it.
look into that, get an answer back. Otherwise, in the meantime, we're still looking for anybody that would like to be on it. Please fill out an application and we'll.
And if
make
somebody
a-
filled an interim and it worked, it'd be nice to know that we could appoint them and let them continue rather than wait for an election to go through, if that's how it works. If it doesn't, then we just wait for the election, but.
Right.
Some of those
So
things don't
thank
have to
you.
be so difficult.
Okay, we had correspondence related to Planet Aid requests for boxes. Do we know what that?
I had a gentleman that represented Planet Aid in my office that was basically looking for a number of places in town to put those big yellow boxes for Planet Aid. He had originally asked for a position up here on this parking lot. I didn't think that was something that we want here, but he noted a few other locations, I basically, or that were town-owned, I asked for him to at least touch base with if it was a town-owned property, like, I know he mentioned the library and the council on aging, I asked him to touch base with the directors of those facilities first. Anywhere else would be, privately owned.
Why was your objection to up here?
Hmm?
Why did you object to up here?
I just figured that I didn't straight up tell him to reject that. I said I'd bring it forward, but my personal opinion was that I'd rather be in other locations than just town hall.
Because they've always had some Salvation Army boxes down at
Transfer station.
They are gonna put
Barre
it at the
Foods
transfer.
and the transfer station.
Yeah, transfer station was one of the locations that he already spoke with Solid Waste Solutions that they were on board with putting one down there. And then he
What,
was
in
also
lieu
gonna
of the
talk.
Salvation Army one, or they'll just put another box to throw your clothes?
Put another box. It's a different
There'd be
organization.
3 down there.
It's a different organization, so.
Well, that's kind of my point with use
My-
of town property.
and
This
that's
is
where
almost a
I'm-
procurement
Right,
process.
and I'm also trying to, that's why I wasn't in favor of putting one up here, mainly because once you open the door to one, you have to open the door up to all of
You
them.
know, a parking lot full of them.
So maybe we just let them go to private property like the other ones have? I mean, if IGA's done it, it can, well, if it goes down the transfer station, that would be town property, but there's gotta be other places, businesses, I would think would probably welcome it.
I know he was gonna reach out to the owner of the property that Barre Foods is on, see if there was a possible location there. The American Legion building was gonna reach out to them as well.
And the library, as we discussed before, is privately held, not town-owned.
Right,
So
so
that would be a
you
good location
talk to
for it.
them.
If we talk to Stephanie, maybe she'd consider it down there.
Possibly. I know they got the used book bin out back. They got other recycle things in the back. It depends on how much they want to put out there.
Right, it's leaving it to their discretion. My own personal opinion was just for up here, I didn't feel it was a proper fit.
I don't mind it uptown, but I think that if we open that can of worms, that, you know, then everyone else that says we
Yeah.
wanna have it, that we'd be picking, choosing to get involved in who can and can't have one up here, so.
On top of that, I wouldn't want anything on our property that didn't have a full agreement written out with all liabilities, insurances, determined who's liable for what and who's taking response.
Right.
It's a big box that anybody can throw anything in.
Right, and I know that they.
It's not on the town, whatever ends up in that box and whoever's near it when something doesn't go right.
Right.
And I wanna make sure that if we do anything like, we work with all our legal counsel options to make sure we're on the same.
So why don't we recommend they stay with private property
Mhm.
and decline the use of town property for the box? I don't have a problem with that.
That'd be my recommendation at this time. And it's, again, it's not to keep people from donating, it's just
It adds
work
us
with the
as-
other people that are private.
It adds us as de facto monitors if it ends up on our property. I mean, even as much as they wanna say that we'll be up here every day and taking a
Well,
look
and
at it.
sometimes things overflow, people just leave it on the ground and not inside it, and then it becomes, you know,
Right.
who's gonna deal with that and when. It's probably better off to just not have it.
Okay.
Town property.
I had 2 other things here. One was a request for a release from Chapter 61A. I was planning on putting this on your next agenda, but wanted to make sure that it was heard by planning and conservation, the assessors, before action taken from you guys. So at least this was just for your awareness.
No, it's coming down.
Yeah, and I had failed to put this on the agenda, so we could take this up in another meeting, but just the note that request for appointment for Paul Murphy to the 9/11 Memorial Committee.
Did we have someone resign?
We did.
Colleen Curtin.
Colleen Gerben, yes.
Colleen did? Okay.
So I could bring that formally for you for next meeting, but wanted to get this one ahead.
Speaking of that, though, I'd also like to see if you could reach out to the chairman and find out where they're at.
Yeah.
What's the update? Are they still working together for the public safety building, or they split up and half of them are running off on one other thing or something?
Okay, I'll reach out to him.
The 61A, is there anything we need to take action on that, or is that straightforward? They have to pay the back taxes on things and they can remove it when they want?
You're basically voting to take no action because the town has the right of first refusal under a 61A.
Okay.
Basically, if you don't agree with the transfer of property, the town can, if we had the money available, go and purchase that property.
So they'd have to include the price in their paperwork. I didn't see it in here.
Right, if we felt that it was.
Well, you'd have to know what that is before you made a decision, I think. And I didn't see any notation of price in here.
We can assign that right too.
Right, we can assign it to
Do it like a nonprofit or something.
Oh, we can?
Yeah. If it was something the town, we felt the town was gonna need, or.
That was just not including yours, but it was.
Community solar.
Hmm?
So that
Never mind.
33,000 is what they're-
That was not a nice comment.
5,000, and it's 2.6 acres.
Scares
Now,
me.
this is already subdivided, or they're planning to subdivide it as well? A lot of times this.
It would already be they're probably planning on subdividing because 61A protection is gotta be a minimum of
5 acres.
5 acres? Okay, so if it's only 2, then they're probably subdividing a larger lot.
So this is right at the junction of Flaherty. So this is where they were doing that fill, bringing sludge in for fill a couple of years ago. Is that what that is? And they brought sludge up the top of the hill there.
Come on.
You know where that is?
With that what?
By the
Not
reservoir.
God's wisdom.
It's up near, no, before that, where the reservoir is.
Flaherty, right? Before the reservoir.
Oh, yeah, well, right where Flaherty Road is. Flaherty's off, if I'm
Oh.
getting the right road. Right, Flaherty's is
Corner of Flaherty and Williamsville.
Flaherty the one right there by the old reservoir?
Yes.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
So we had the fire, so that's that piece of land, and that's where they filled with sludge, wasn't it, where they dropped sludge a couple of years ago?
Good question.
They clear cut the trees a while
I
back,
remember the clear cutting of it.
probably 3 years ago, and then there was sludge 2 years ago. So what's the plan of development there? Or it's gonna be individual lots? Well, if they subdivide, that'll have to go by the planning board anyways. Interesting.
Notice of an intent to sell, not just change use of. Okay.
Where they gotta get out of protection to sell it and give us first right to refusal is what the notice is about. I'm just curious,
It's
it's exactly-
valued more if you take it out of 61A, I guess.
I think it was contingent
To
upon their
sell.
sale, they had to have it out to sell it, I think their agreement. I read through very briefly, it's in, I think it's in a, attorney's hands right now.
Yeah.
So it's an estate issue, and the estate agreed to pull it out of 61A to sell it. And obviously, if they're selling a portion of it, it's gonna have to be subdivided at some point. But it shouldn't have any effect on us. So this is right after Jay Pimentel's house, and there's that one house that was built, and then this land would be after that. There's a no trespassing sign on the dirt road that goes in.
Okay. All right. We'll put it on the agenda for next week and make
Yep.
a decision or not regarding that.
I don't think
I'll
so.
just make sure,
Interesting, all right.
acknowledgement from the other boards that they've received and don't have any additional comment.
Okay, excellent.
Either of you selectmen have something specific you'd like to bring up for this meeting under selectmen's report?
Do not.
I do not.
I do not either. I'd like to take a 2-minute recess, and then we're gonna move into executive session. There's a couple of them. We'll do the spiel publicly, but for everybody's information, we're not coming back to open meeting. We'll do the perfect wording after this recess.
Thank you.